Hello everyone, today we are tearing down 2,000 years of propaganda and slander to reveal the real legal system of the Qin Dynasty, the first unified empire-wide legal code in Chinese history. A system so precise, so unforgiving, and so bureaucratically perfect that it forged a nation from warring states and then collapsed under its own unyielding weight. For centuries, historians and storytellers have painted Qin law as nothing but random, sadistic cruelty, but in 1975, a discovery in a small tomb in Yunmeng, Hubei province, changed everything. The Shuihudi Qin Bamboo Slips 1155 well-preserved bamboo strips buried with a low-ranking Qin official named Shi, holding over 600 intact legal clauses that give us the first true look at how Qin actually ruled. This is not a set of arbitrary punishments, it is a codified, all-encompassing machinery of control, designed to turn a fractured feudal world into a single, obedient imperial state. Let us start at the very beginning. Where did Qin law come from? Long before unification, Qin adopted the legal philosophy of legalism, and its foundational text was the Canon of Laws by Li Kui of Wei, the first systematic criminal code in ancient China. When Huang came to Qin to carry out his historic reforms, he did not invent law out of thin air. He redefined fei law as a statute, turning flexible rules into fixed universal codes that applied to every person under Qin rule, from nobles to peasants, with almost no exceptions. This shift was revolutionary. For the first time, power was tied, not to personal favor or bloodline, but to written enforceable statutes. By the time Qin Shi Huang unified China in 221 BCE, he expanded this code into a nationwide legal system, declaring that all laws and orders are unified, erasing the conflicting laws of the 6 conquered states, and imposing one iron standard across every province, city, and village. The Qin legal system was built on a 2-tier structure, a core criminal code, and dozens of administrative statutes that governed every corner of public and private life. The core criminal code followed Li Kui's 6 essential chapters, each designed to eliminate chaos and protect state power. First, the Dao Lil theft law, which punished any seizure of public or private property. Even small theft of grain, tools, or livestock carried heavy penalties because property security was seen as the bedrock of social order. Second, the ZLV tort law, which covered homicide, assault, and bodily harm. Qin law drew sharp distinctions between intentional killing, accidental killing, and self-defense, a level of nuance most people never associate with Qin justice. Third, the Chu LV prison law, which regulated detention, investigation, interrogation, and trial procedures. The Shuihudi slips show strict rules for collecting evidence, recording testimony, and avoiding coerced confessions, a formal judicial process far more advanced than popular myths claim. Fourth, the Bu Lelv arrest law, which mandated strict duties for officials and civilians to capture fugitives. Failure to report or assist in an arrest was itself a crime. Fifth, the Za Elv miscellaneous law, which covered everything from gambling and trespassing to improper dress and overstepping social rank, closing every loophole for unregulated behavior. Sixth, the Zhu Lilv statute of adjustment, which governed sentencing guidelines, aggravating and mitigating circumstances, and consistent application of punishment across all cases. This 6-part core was the criminal backbone, but Qin law went much further. The Shuihudi slips reveal 18 major administrative statutes that turned the entire empire into a regulated machine. There was the Tianlel field law, controlling crop, planting, water use, and disaster reporting to ensure state food supplies. The Kang Lelv granary law, managing state grain, storage distribution, and inventory checks with zero tolerance for embezzlement. The Zhu Yuan Lilv stable and pasture law, protecting state livestock, critical for farming and warfare. The Yao LV Corvée labor law, dictating mandatory labor service for public projects like roads, walls, and palaces. Missing labor deadlines meant severe punishment. The Gong LV craftsmanship law, standardizing tool, production material, quality, and worker quotas to maintain imperial infrastructure. The Jin Bu Lelv money and market law, regulating currency trade and merchant behavior to prevent fraud and stabilize the economy. The Zili LV official appointment law, setting, hiring, promotion, and discipline rules for all government workers. Incompetence, corruption, and abuse of power were felonies, not minor missteps. Every single function of the state and society had a statute, a rule, and a consequence. Qin's slogan, "All affairs have a legal model," was not an empty phrase, but a lived reality for every person under its rule. Now let us turn to the crimes that filled Qin's courts and prisons, divided into 4 catastrophic categories that targeted the greatest threats to imperial control. The first and most deadly category, crimes against the emperor and imperial authority. This included treason, rebellion, conspiracy, slander, spreading evil words, and using the past to criticize the present. These crimes carried automatic capital punishment, often with collective punishment for family and associates. Because the emperor was the legal and moral heart of the empire, any attack on him was an attack on the entire system. The second category, crimes against person and property, the most common offenses in daily life. Theft, robbery, assault, and homicide were punished harshly but consistently. Even minor theft could lead to forced labor, while violent theft or homicide meant death. Qin law treated crimes against officials more severely than those against civilians, reinforcing the hierarchy of state power. The third category, official crimes and dereliction of duty. Qin held its bureaucrats to an almost impossible standard, mismanaging grain, miscalculating inventory, failing to enforce laws, or neglecting labor duties, all led to fines, demotion, forced labor, or even death. This was not cruelty, it was a deliberate design to eliminate corruption and ensure the state machine ran without error. The fourth category, crimes against social order and state duties. The most widespread was evasion of corvée labor or military service, a direct threat to the empire's projects and security. Other offenses included falsifying household registers, hiding population, violating funeral rules, and committing unfilial acts. Qin law saw family and social order as extensions of imperial order, so breaking social rules meant breaking state law. Together, these crimes created a society where every action was monitored, every choice had a legal weight, and disobedience had a fixed, unavoidable price. Next, we examine the punishment system that made Qin law infamous, a layered escalating structure designed to punish, deter, and exploit labor for the empire. Qin punishments were not random. They followed a strict hierarchy, from minor fines to death, with many combining physical pain and forced service. First, capital punishment, death penalties reserved for the worst crimes. Common forms included qi, shou, beheading, and displaying the head in public. Qi shi execution in a busy market to show public rejection. Yao zhan, waist cutting, a slow humiliating death chelai, tearing apart by 5 horses, the ultimate. Shame and zhu wu xing, the 5 punishments together, tattooing, cutting the nose, chopping off toes, beating to death, then beheading and displaying the body, the most brutal sentence for treason and extreme crimes. Second, corporal punishment, physical mutilation, carried out alongside other sentences to mark offenders for life. Qing xing, tattooing the face with ingti xing, cutting off the nose. Yue xing, chopping off feet or toes. And gong xing, castration for men, confinement for women, destroyed a person's physical integrity and social status, ensuring they could never hide their crime. Third, penal servitude, forced labor, the most common punishment used to fuel the empire's massive building projects. Sentences were gender-specific, chengdan for men, building city walls, roads, and fortifications, and chong for women grinding rice and domestic labor for the state. Gui xin for men gathering firewood for ancestral temples, and bai kan for women sorting rice. Siko, frontier guard duty, and hu low-level frontier service. These were long, grueling sentences that often led to death from exhaustion, exposure, or injury. Fourth, exile, banishment, forcing criminals to move to remote border regions, separating them from their communities, and expanding imperial settlement. Fifth, fines, Z penalties requiring offenders to pay in armor, shields, or grain. Wealthier people could avoid physical punishment, but commoners had to work off the debt, creating a class divide in justice. The most terrifying feature of Qin law was collective punishment, lianzuo. One person's crime could punish their entire family, neighbors, and even supervising officials. This created a society where people policed each other, terrified of being dragged down by a relative's or neighbor's mistake. It was a diabolically effective system of social control, but it also bred deep, silent resentment that would explode into rebellion after Qin Shi Huang's death. We must confront a critical historical truth. Qin law was not inherently evil or insane. It was a ruthlessly logical tool of centralization, built for a specific purpose, to unify a war-torn continent and hold it together with zero tolerance for chaos. Later, dynasties, especially the Han, exaggerated Qin's cruelty to legitimize their own rule, erasing the system's precision, consistency, and role as the foundation of all later Chinese imperial law. The Shuihudi Qin Bamboo Slips prove that Qin law had clear rules, evidence-based trials, and consistent sentencing, far from the mad random violence of legend. It was a system that worked too well. It built an empire in decades, but its unyielding harshness, combined with crippling labor demands, and endless military campaigns made obedience impossible to sustain. When the first uprisings broke out, millions chose death over living under the Iron Code. The Qin legal system was both the greatest achievement and the fatal flaw of the first Chinese empire. It created the blueprint for imperial law that shaped China for 2,000 years, yet its cruelty and inflexibility became a timeless warning about power without mercy, control without compassion, and law without humanity. It remains one of history's most chilling examples of how a perfect logical system can destroy the very people it was meant to govern. If you enjoyed this journey into ancient China, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more epic history. See you next time.